The following podcast is a presentation of This Is Infamous. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome, ladies and gents. Thanks for tuning in to another brand spanking new edition of Intelligent Wrestling Conversation. I'm your host, as always, Billy Donnelly, and you've picked a good one to make sure you're listening to today, wherever it is you are out there in the world. Loaded show. I cannot underscore this enough. This show is going to blow you away. That's how much wrestling we have in store for you on this particular episode. Tom Nix, the professor, are going to join me later on in the episode. So we're going to talk about WrestleCircus. We're also going to talk some more about Evolve Wrestling. So a lot of things to look forward to there as far as off the radar of your WWE mindset. But coming up in just a little bit, joining me on the This Is Infamous hotline, he was once the voice of NXT as well as the former voice of SmackDown. He is the artist formerly known as Rich Brennan. Rich Bocchini going to be talking to me extensively about his time with NXT, with the WWE, and his history with wrestling, including, once again, bringing it full circle, more WrestleCircus discussion. So look forward to that coming up in just a little bit. But before that, look, there's a lot of things to talk about this week. I want to touch on a couple of things before I send you into my talk with Rich. First things first, Mauro Ranallo is finished with WWE. This is now an official parting of the ways. Ranallo sent a statement to Newsweek by email saying that the WWE and I have mutually agreed to part ways. It has nothing to do with JBL. WWE spokesperson also confirmed Mauro Ranallo was going to be leaving the company, but said that he will remain under contract through August the 12th. So in the meantime, he can do MMA fights, he can do Showtime boxing, he can do all the things that he previously had been doing along the way. The podcasting, calling all the fights, just cannot call wrestling while he is still under contract. What that means for the future, what that means once August runs out, once that means that probably his no-compete runs out, who knows where Mauro Ranallo may end up. But look, as I've talked about in the past, this is the WWE's loss and the rest of the world's gain. With Mauro Ranallo minus this commitment to the WWE, which did not treat him very well. Not treat him very well at all. That just leaves an opportunity for Mauro Ranallo to fill a void somewhere else. Where that could be, I don't know. There's other wrestling companies that should kill for a voice like Mauro Ranallo to be calling their action. Could he go to Impact Wrestling? Who knows? Could he go to ROH? Who knows? Could he go to New Japan, where he had previously been once upon a time? Who knows? But I believe, knowing how much Mauro Ranallo loves the sport of professional wrestling, that this will not be the end of his time with wrestling. That we will see him behind a mic calling action somewhere at some point in the future. And he'll be happier for it. We'll be happier for it. And the WWE, they're going to wish that they didn't let this one get away. And they should have protected this guy, and they should have helped this guy. And instead, what are they doing? They have JBL now co-hosting Talking Smack. Have you ever seen a guy get so rewarded for doing the wrong thing that we've seen with JBL in the past few weeks, since more of these allegations about how he treated Mauro Ranallo and how he treated Justin Roberts and other wrestlers have come out? I mean, this is unbelievable. The WWE has previously been very image conscious and staying away from toxic personalities who may damage their business. And yet somehow JBL continues to just plow forward through all of that. It's astounding to me. Anyone else would be put on the sideline or hushed up or hidden under the rug or whatever. But for some reason, they continue to trot JBL out there to call action on SmackDown Live, to now co-host Talking Smack. And all I can see is it's sort of a doubling down. And, maybe that's the culture we're in right now, is people doubling down against being accused of doing the wrong thing. But I'll tell you what, the WWE has never seen lower ratings consistently than they are right now with Raw and SmackDown Live. That's a fact. Their numbers are not strong at all. In fact, what we keep seeing is low numbers week in and week out. So the last thing that the WWE should be doing is sort of poking and prodding at their fan base that they can sort of do whatever it is that they want. Because in doing so, you're going to alienate people who are just going to look for other options. And as we talk about every week on this show, there are other options out there. You don't have to watch the WWE if you don't like the product that they're putting out there for you to consume. There's a whole world of wrestling out there for you to gravitate and embrace. WWE may be the biggest game in town, but they don't have to be the only game in town. And if you don't like what they're doing, feel free to check out and go look at something else. The one thing, though, that I did want to touch upon with the WWE outside of the Mauro Ranallo situation and sort of the resolution that has now come to is back on SmackDown Live. We talked about this last week, sort of the rise of new blood into the main event scene, into the title pictures. We saw the Shining Stars get a big win in the tag team division and sort of get some value back as a tag team worth watching. Jinder Mahal is the #1 contender for the WWE Championship, sort of seeing some value being rebuilt within what he's doing in the WWE landscape. And now, this past week on SmackDown Live, Breezango has become #1 contenders for the Tag Team Championship. Now look, I love Breezango. I do. I really do. Fandango, that poor bastard, has been saddled with an awful gimmick for a number of years. And has finally figured out something to do with it. That dude has worked hard and persevered, and him being involved in the title picture of the tag team division on SmackDown Live, kudos to him. I'm happy for him. I'm super happy for him that they have taken Breezango and made it not into a joke anymore. That they are now trying to give them some legitimacy. And Tyler Breeze, huge fan of Tyler Breeze, going all the way back to his NXT days. As a singles competitor, I think he can bring it. I think his character is unique and different. A nice spin on sort of the arrogant narcissist we've seen over the years as a persona for a number of individuals within the wrestling business. So these two guys together, like, I'd ditch the name, I'd give them something else. If they want to be the fashion police, I might bring that together. But I'm glad to see that SmackDown Live, for all its JBL faults, is actually carrying through on its label of the land of opportunity. They are taking guys who were cast-offs, the island of misfit toys, as I like to call them, and making them valuable, making them count, making them meaningful, and as a result, the value of the entire show goes up. Because when you have every single person on your roster believable, of getting a win, of being competitive, of being legitimate when they come to the ring, then your brand as a whole is pretty solid. All right, so with all that out of the way, I don't want to waste too much time because I have, like I said, a loaded show in store for you. Technically, I could put this show and break it into 2 parts, but why would I do that? Why should I make you wait for really good stuff a whole nother week? I'm just going to give it to you all in flux, a whole big bulk package. So right now, joining me on the This Is Infamous hotline, as I said earlier, he is the former voice of NXT. He is the former voice of SmackDown. He is the artist formerly known as Rich Brennan. You can find him on Twitter at Rich Bocchini. Here he is, ladies and gentlemen, Rich Bocchini. Rich, I guess the best place to sort of start is your background overall in sports announcing. People don't just fall into announcing wrestling. You had sort of a long history with sports announcing and wrestling in general. So I guess, can you talk a little bit to kick things off about where you got started and how you sort of came up to eventually get involved in wrestling?
Yeah, you're right. It was kind of a circuitous path, I suppose. I started off doing college radio. I went to Rhode Island College, and I did. There was a metal and hardcore and indie rock show, whatever that they asked me to do. So I did that and just had fun. I just wanted to play records and listen to new music and get music for free. But this is in the 1994. So I did that for a couple of years. In the meantime, I was always a hockey fan. I played hockey growing up and knew I wasn't ever going to have an opportunity to play pro or anything like that. And somewhere along the line, I got an idea that I would be a hockey play-by-play guy. Probably just from growing up and watching the Bruins on TV. I grew up in Rhode Island, right outside of Providence. We get the Bruins games and all the Boston teams. So anyway, I decided that I was going to try to become a hockey play-by-play guy, and used to go to games, American Hockey League games with a tape deck and practice calling games and doing all that until I finally got my first gig in Knoxville, Tennessee with a United Hockey League team there. So it was, very, I don't want to say bottom of the barrel league, but it was, at the time about as low in the minors as you could go, but it was pro. And that was my first opportunity to actually get a paycheck and call hockey. So that kind of led me on this odyssey, I guess. From Knoxville, I ended up back in Worcester, Mass. From there, Bridgeport, Connecticut, down to McAllen, Texas, to Houston, Texas, and that's where I really started doing wrestling. I'd always been a wrestling fan. Kind of drifted in and out of watching it at certain times, depending on, kind of what was going on in my life or whatever, and if I had the time to watch or not. But I always kind of kept an eye on what was going on, even if I wasn't necessarily up to the minute with what was happening with wrestling. But when I was in Houston, I ended up ring announcing for, at the time, it was an NWA from NWA Houston was the promotion. And then from there, I got hooked up with Booker T's promotion, Reality of Wrestling, and that's really where things kind of clicked for me in a lot of different ways. I got very, very involved in, I guess, the behind-the-scenes stuff with Book's promotion, not booking the stuff or necessarily coming up with the creative stuff. I certainly, hadn't had a small hand in that at times, but just more of the technical stuff. We redid the website when we didn't even have a website. I did the website and kind of took different ideas into the YouTube show that we were doing and just tried to expand that to the point that, we were doing pretty well. And I kind of got the ball rolling to get the show on TV in Houston. I'm not going to take full credit for any of that stuff because it definitely isn't all me, but I was there for that kind of expansion and the growth of Reality of Wrestling. One thing led to another. I had talked to Book and got some stuff together, and next thing I knew, I was on my way down to Florida to try out for NXT, and did that. Went on that ride for 2.5 years, and called some SmackDown and called NXT, and did a lot of different things, traveled to a lot of different places. So that's the I guess the abridged version of my path to wrestling announcer mediocrity, I suppose. I don't know.
Well, when you talk about NXT, NXT has always been seen as this developmental brand within the WWE machine, but it's developmental not just for wrestlers or superstars, which is what a lot of people focus on, but referees, ring announcers, backstage interviewers, and the commentating team also come up and develop through NXT. So what was sort of the direction you were given for how you were expected to sound for the NXT brand once you were on board?
To be honest, so the very first show that I did, I'd moved from Houston to Orlando. And I was here in Orlando for, I don't know, it was like 3 days or something when I did the first taping. Like, they literally just threw me into the fire. So there wasn't a whole ton of direction at that point. It was just kind of go out there. I think, obviously the very first show, they just wanted to, they hold on a second. Hold on. Sorry. my cat was stuck in the, she's stuck in the screen trying to get a lizard. Good God. You're going to edit this, right?
Well, I can leave it in. No one expected the cat run in.
All right. So anyway, yeah, I think she's fine now. The lizard's gone, and her claw's not in the screen anymore. So the first show that I did, they literally just kind of threw me out there, and it was a process from there. What I was basically told was NXT was sort of a hybrid of announcing. So Raw is more of the overall pop music storytelling, trying to kind of draw the average viewer. NXT was obviously more of a wrestling show, more for the wrestling fan, but you still have to tell your stories. So it was kind of like I said, sort of a hybrid as to how WWE wants their announcers to sound or wants them to, call the action or not call the action.
Well, how hands-on is, I guess, the production team with the announcers at that point in time? Because the NXT, when you talk about the tapings, it's far different than what you're doing with Raw or SmackDown, because you're talking about, like 4-hour tapings and multiple shows. Some matches you're calling live there. Some you may be going back and dubbing or recalling later. So how hands-on were they, though, as far as, what they wanted you to sound like, what they might want you to say at a particular time, feeding lines, or was it more hands-off and sort of letting you guide the product?
A little bit of both. Definitely when we were taping the shows, Michael Cole was the producer, and I'm assuming he still is. I don't know. But he would jump in. They would have certain things that they would want us to get over, certain points in a match or whatever that they would want us to point out or talk about. If we missed something, you'd hear it on the headset. But there was always an explanation why. The idea was for us to get better. To kind of understand the whole process and the whole concept. So they were hands on for sure. A lot of times with NXT, with the live tapings anyway, when you're doing 3 hours or 4 hours at a time, just like Raw and SmackDown, stuff changes, and it changes at the last minute. So there were certain times where you're calling matches and you really don't have a story for it sometimes. Sometimes it's a cold story. Sometimes a story would develop, say, like in the second episode, and there would be a pre-tape where something would happen in the pre-tape which sets up a match for hour 4. However, when you're taping that, you don't see that pre-tape because the pre-tape hasn't been done yet. They would do it afterwards. So you would kind of have to talk about a match that's set up based on something that you haven't seen yet, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, and the problem with that is that sometimes those pre-tapes would change as well. Sometimes different things would change. So you may be calling the match, talking about what you assume the pre-tape is going to look like based on what it says in the run sheet. But then something changes, and now you have to go back and you have to recall this match because the thing you were talking about that set this up is now completely different because, whatever many variables that can happen. So there's a lot that goes into it for sure.
Yeah, it's no longer a fluid process. It's very much a Frankenstein of different areas coming together in the end. I mean, do you? I mean, the NXT thing is sort of just the way that it works. That's the way that the scheduling works, the way that the tapings work. Did you find it to be difficult to put your efforts into doing it that way, or was it something that you sort of learn on the fly and then you just get used to?
It's a little bit of both. I mean, to be honest, coming from doing Booker's show, we would do, I think, 3 or 4 weeks at a time at Book's show. So the idea of having to think ahead and trying to think, okay, where are we time-wise? That wasn't foreign to me. It's still a challenge when you're trying to put some of that stuff together, and you're talking about something that hasn't happened yet in some cases. But the idea of, okay, so this match, this was 2 weeks ago when this happened, and this, you're pre-selling another event. This is 2 weeks away, or this is 1 week away now. So that stuff isn't necessarily, that wasn't that hard, I don't think. But the most challenging thing is when you're not really sure of the what and the why, and you're just kind of calling a match. And you know that there's supposed to be a reason, but this pre-tape, like I said, this pre-tape, and this might change. So you're kind of that's where it gets a little dicey.
Can you talk a little bit about everything that sort of goes on throughout the week for putting together a broadcast, as well as improving and getting better during your time at NXT? Because I think a lot of times people they don't understand how the sausage gets made. They just think that they just think that people show up and they call matches and then they go home and then that's it. But there's so much.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah. But there's so much more that goes into it. So I guess, can you talk a little bit about the daily grind and what it is that you were expected to do on a regular basis to get yourself ready for the next match or revising a match that you already called, or the next taping, even for that matter, or the next takeover, everything that sort of goes into to putting those shows together for on air?
Well, when I was at the Performance Center, before I was on the road with the main roster, my gig was being at the Performance Center basically every day. So Monday, I'll start top of the week. So Monday you go in, you get some stuff together, you call some matches, whatever. There's just a lot of different things that go on during the day. Production may need something taped. The coaches in their classes, they may need some help. So there are times that I'd grab the video camera and jump on the side of the ring and start taping practice, and then editing that down so the coaches could they would call it a skull session, so they could sit in with the guys and kind of look at what was going on and what they wanted to work on and different things. Video is always the best teacher, right? Mm-hmm. Whether it's wrestling or hockey or baseball, when you can see what's going on, it's that much better of a teaching tool. So I would do some of that. I would help upload the promo class videos. I would help run promo class at times. Not that I was directing it, but it'd be there with Dusty running. I would run the camera sometimes. Ryan Katz would run the camera sometimes. There was just a lot of different things that you wouldn't think go on. That again, you think it's wrestling. How hard is it? You put the show together and you show up, the guys wrestle, and you announce it, and then you go home. It's like no, man. It was again all day. Every day, really. So Mondays, you'd be in at 9 a.m. Or you'd sit down with Dusty and see what he needed. Sometimes he'd ask you to type up a report for him. He'd hand you his notes, which we used to joke was in Dusty Glyphics. But knowing him, you kind of knew you could read it and you understood what he wanted. And he would say, you know what I'm talking about. You know what I mean. Just put it together, and if I don't like it, I'll tell you to change it. Okay, fine. So there was some of that. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, there was always promo class. Usually at 6:00, so you'd be there at night. So you'd be there from 6 to 8 or whatever for promo class. So I mean, they were very, very long days. Thursday, you would have a live event somewhere. Friday, you would have a live event somewhere. Saturday, you would have a live event from somewhere. Usually, at least Thursday and Friday, you were supposed to be at the Performance Center in the morning. Usually, they would have the talent go in. They would have ring time, or they would have a quick workout or whatever. So say on a Thursday night, you're in Jacksonville. You drive back 2.5, 3 hours from Jacksonville. You get home at 1 or 2 in the morning, and then you're back at the Performance Center at whatever time, 9 in the morning. And then they'd be in the ring, and you'd take care of stuff that you'd have to do in the office, and then go and get lunch, and then you're back on the road at 2 o'clock to get to whatever town you need to get to for 4 o'clock for load in for the live event. If you were driving to, say Tampa, that's a 2-hour ride. So now you get in the car and you're driving there, you're loading in, you're doing the same thing again. So it's Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So then Sunday, for a while, what my job was I would take the camera that we would tape the live events with and pull everything off of the camera, and then have to label them and upload them to the back end system that we would use. There was a time when we were still doing DVDs, so the coaches could show DVDs during their practice call sessions. So that would take all day. That would take most of the day on Sunday, because you'd have to convert the video over from these gigantic files into smaller MP4s or whatever was needed, and then you'd upload it to where it needed to go, and then you'd start the process all over again on Monday mornings. So it certainly wasn't pull your notes together and show up and put on a headset and call sports entertainment matches. It wasn't that at all. There's a lot more that went into it.
Let me ask you about sort of your relationship and the chemistry that you had with Corey Graves. I was a huge fan of NXT, especially during this time, and I thought you and Corey were just absolutely amazing together. And I wanted to sort of get into the headspace of how does that relationship come together? Do you guys talk off camera? Do you guys hang out? Is it just something where it just clicks? When the mics go hot. Like, how did it come together for you guys to really be so good together?
Well, first of all, I appreciate that. I really do. Sometimes there are certain broadcast partners that you can work with that it just clicks, even if you've never worked with them before. And vice versa. Sometimes there are broadcast partners that you can work with for a long time and it never clicks. And there are other people that you'll work with once and you never want to work with them again, even though you might like them as a person. As far as Graves and I, when I first got down there, that was kind of like the beginning of his injury, and the problems that he was running into with his injuries. So he was out for a bit, and I remember I got an email from Michael Cole saying, hey, get together with this guy, get him in the voiceover room at the Performance Center, and let's work with him. He's out hurt, so let's see what he's got. And that's, I should mention, that's another thing that every day at the Performance Center we were in there, whether it was me and Graves or me and Jason Albert or whoever else, we were in there for 2-3 hours at a time calling matches, sometimes recalling the same matches. And these matches weren't going anywhere. We were just calling them to practice to kind of, this is how you call a match. This is right. It's getting your reps. So that's what we would do. But anyway, so as far as Graves goes, I got with him and said, okay, let's see what we got, and we go in the voiceover room, and I said spend hours in there at a time. Now I think some of that, as far as chemistry goes, Graves and I like a lot of the same stuff, or at least similar stuff. It's pretty obvious with him. He's all tatted up and everything, and you can kind of look at him and say, oh, he's into punk rock. Most people don't look at me and think that I'm into hardcore or punk or metal or indie stuff or anything. They think I look like Millhouse and I'm a geek. And I probably am, but I'm very much into hardcore and punk and indie rock and that type of stuff. So that was like a common thread right there, that we were able to talk about certain bands and certain music. And that's, when it comes to underground music or punk or anything, that's kind of a unifying thing between people. So that definitely helped as far as the chemistry goes. But we just got along and went in the booth and just practiced, and it just kind of clicked. And it wasn't very long that we were in there that I sent an email to Cole saying, listen, like, we could put this guy on TV tomorrow. And this was months before he made his debut at our Evolution that following December. I mean, this is probably like April of, I guess, 2014. So, and at the time too, he still wasn't sure whether or not he was going to be able to continue competing in the ring. So there was some of that, and I think it was July maybe when they finally told him that he wasn't going to be able to step back in the ring. And that was when it was kind of put to him, hey, like we still have a spot for you here. So Graves at that point just got involved with everything. He would come to the live event. He was going to live events anyway, previously as a wrestler, obviously. But now on this other side, he was going, we're setting up the audio and literally climbing under the ring and running audio cables to the soundboard, setting up lights and figuring out whose music to play first and all those things. So we worked together like so much and would ride together sometimes to different shows or just during the day, go to lunch or whatever. So whatever it was, we clicked and yeah.
Well, how much
it was fun.
Well, how much does having, I guess, clearly defined roles for the announcers also help in that setup? Because your role was very much the straight play-by-play guy, and he was very much the heel antagonistic voice. Defending guys cheating, looking the other way towards heel maneuvers. But when you have that sort of dynamic and you know exactly, I guess, what lane you're supposed to be traveling in, does that help it come together any easier?
I think so. Generally, the play-by-play guy in WWE is going to be the guy in the middle. As you should be. As the play-by-play guy, you're supposed to be the kind of the credible voice, I guess, or the impartial voice. And it's kind of interesting what you said in some ways, because as far as play-by-play guys, at least during my time there, they told us, be vanilla, be down the middle, be vanilla. And a lot of people complain, well, WWE play-by-play guys are kind of robotic or kind of bland or whatever. It's like, well, that's what they wanted us to be. I'm not saying that I'm Mr. Personality or anything like that, but there are times that I think were the leash off a little bit. I might have been a little more maybe a little more dynamic or whatever. But basically, they were told, be down the middle, be vanilla, and set up the analysts. So, I mean, that's really the formula for it. And really, I mean, in some ways, I think that's the best way. The play-by-play guy really isn't the star. The analysts are the stars. You're there to identify and to kind of explain and to set up the points that your analysts are going to make. And that's really any sport. If you're watching a hockey game, you could argue that Mike Emmerich is the star as far as the play-by-play guy goes. But if you listen to what he does, he's setting up whoever. Usually he works with Eddie Olczyk, right? Mm-hmm. So he's setting up Eddie Olczyk. Eddie Olczyk's the guy who's going to explain to you what happened on this particular play. And it's the same thing with wrestling, sort of, or at least it should be.
Well, let me ask you that as far as that, because you're talking about, be vanilla, be bland. But one of the things that I thought made you and Corey go so great together was you could sense that there was a real passion and enthusiasm for what you're watching. Being real in the moment and not necessarily trying to scale it back or concoct your words, I guess, so much, but actually reacting in a legitimate fashion to either what you're seeing in the ring or for that matter to what Graves is saying. Because if he's saying something that gets under your skin or that is blatantly false, it's it's easier for you to react in a legitimate manner to that. That the listener or the viewer can identify with that, can say, yeah, he is being a jerk. Like, I understand why he's getting ruffled at that point in time. So, I mean, was there ever a time where they tried to scale that back on you, or was that something that was seen as, I guess, a strength or an asset in your particular attributes?
Graves is obviously a natural at getting a reaction from people and talking as a heel commentator, or even as I don't want to say like a straight down the middle guy, but I mean, I think he's a credible voice. Mm-hmm. He's so quick-witted that he'll just come up with stuff, and you have to be on your toes. But it's never mean-spirited, even if he's digging at you. It's never mean-spirited. I never got that sense from him. I know there were times he was being fed lines or whatever, and the idea that is, you know, to create that sort of, I guess, antagonistic environment. But it was always within the realm of the show. So we just kind of had fun with it, really. I mean, nobody ever, I don't know. I mean, certainly there was stuff that we would be talked to about, hey, don't go here, don't go there, or whatever. But if Graves had a funny one-liner, you just kind of reacted to it. I think probably one of the funniest things that I ever got him on was, you know, he used to do the whole thing where he'd go nuts with Eva Marie coming to the ring, and he would just praise Eva Marie. And he said something about there's Eva Marie, thing of beauty, tremendous, blah 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 blah, whatever he was saying, and I think he said it goes without saying, or nothing more needs to be said, or whatever. And so I just kind of stopped for a second and I deadpanned and I said, well, then shut up. And he just kind of laughed and he's like, fair point. And she went on with her interest, and now usually that was him telling me to shut up, but at that moment I was able to kind of grab that from him, and I remember the look on his face when I told, because that wasn't my character at all to do that. It was just kind of like I was always the guy that was getting beat on. So when I kind of got him with that, and we all had a good laugh about it, and off we went. That again, that was just kind of, that goes back to that chemistry, I guess, that we had, that we were just able to kind of sense certain things and go from there. So it was definitely a lot of fun.
Announcers always get sort of asked, like, what was your favorite match to call and whatnot. But beyond that, I mean, was there like one night where you just felt like everything was firing on all cylinders, like everything just came together, like you felt your call was so dead on, you thought Graves or whoever was with you was so dead on? Did you ever have just one of those nights where you walked away and you're like, man, we really nailed it that night?
Yeah, there's always things that I'll look at and say, I could have done this better. I could have done that better. As a team, we could have done this better. I never believe that everything is slam dunk 100% awesome. Mm-hmm. But as far as the best shows the shows that I felt the best about, first one, TakeOver Our Evolution, which is December 2014, Sami Zayn versus Neville for the title. I felt everything really, really clicked that night. Again, there's stuff like I'll if I go back and watch it now, I'll find 100 things that I don't like, mm-hmm. that I get. I wish I did this or that or whatever. But just as a whole, it clicked. And then the Brooklyn show was the other one. The very first Brooklyn show that I did with Graves and Byron. Those two shows in particular, I felt really, really, really clicked.
Let me ask you about your call up to the main roster to announce SmackDown, because this was sort of around a time when NXT was really firing on all cylinders still, and you sort of had this segment of the fan base that hoped NXT talent would just stay where they were. Like there was a time where they would go, I hope they don't go up to Raw or SmackDown. Why can't they just stay down in NXT and keep this magic going? What were your feelings at the time on transitioning to to the main roster? Because I'm sure that you heard some of that. I'm sure you guys, you were a family. You guys had been working to build this brand for so long. But at the same time, like the main goal had always been the main roster. So what was sort of your thoughts on being given that nod to move up?
Obviously, Raw and SmackDown, WrestleMania, and all that stuff is the goal. Or for the longest time, it was the goal. NXT didn't exist. And either way you look at it, there's more money for everybody on the quote-unquote main roster for the talent. And I'm assuming for the announcers as well. I wasn't really there long enough to see the payoff from that necessarily, but obviously it's just a bigger thing. It's this giant monster that draws millions and millions of fans and millions of viewers, pay-per-views, and it's the catalyst behind everything we do. So that was the goal. But you're right. Being at NXT, you kind of rebuilt it in a lot of ways. Now, guys like Graves or some of the other talent that was there that came over from FCW, I mean, those guys really felt ownership of it because they started off in that little warehouse in Tampa, came over to Orlando, were there for the opening of the Performance Center, and they were there throughout that whole ride. So they definitely felt ownership of it. For me, I had actually gone to some FCW shows. I have family in Florida, and just as a fan, went to a couple of shows when I came over, and when I was visiting some family over here. My daughter lives in Orlando, so I'd come over to see her, and I would go to a show. So I remember going to some of those shows, and there was like 30 people there. And even starting off doing NXT when I first got here, there were shows that we did that, again, 30, 50 people in attendance. So to be there and to see that grow from that into what it's become, and to be able to sit there in the Barclays Center the night before SummerSlam for whatever it was, 15,000 people, and have them going nuts for NXT, that was a very rewarding thing in a lot of ways. I remember getting the call to the main roster. At first, I was called up to do Superstars, which is, I don't even think they run it anymore, but it was taped before Raw. It was 2 matches and on cam, and that was it. So it was just kind of like, here's your introduction to the main roster. So that was kind of like its own thing for a little bit, because I was still doing NXT, and I would just fly up on Sunday night. I would do Superstars, fly back Tuesday, and then the rest of my week was more or less the same. That grew over time, going from doing Superstars, and then eventually they added Main Event. So that was taped on Tuesday, and then eventually moving me over to SmackDown. So it was kind of like a fast progression. I don't necessarily know that I felt ready to jump in and do SmackDown. I think I would have preferred a little more time to kind of hone my craft a bit more at NXT. But when they give you the opportunity, what are you gonna do? Say no? So I went and I did it again. Like for me, I guess I would have liked a little more time just to kind of developing, just really to get used to the way that they do things, because you get that taste of it at NXT, but everything's just amped up so much on the road even more, and things move so much faster. Things change literally minute by minute, and it's very difficult to just kind of jump in there and to be able to keep up with that. I don't know that anybody can really do that. I mean, it's not calling the matches. That's not the hard part. It's not. That's probably the easiest part of it all. It's really keeping up with traffic. And as the play-by-play guy, you're the traffic cop. So you have to get from segment to segment to segment, and to be able to keep up with that and all the changes, that's really where your money's made. And that's probably the most difficult part of that job, is being able to keep up with everything. So to be able to spend a little more time getting used to that process, I think would have done me a world of good. But on the same hand, if they tell you, hey, we think you're ready, then you trust the people who are in charge. I'm thankful. I'm grateful that I got to do it. There's very few people that can say that they got to call SmackDown, and I'm one of them. And it's not lost on me how many people would kill for that opportunity. So thankful. I'm grateful. I'm appreciative. I'm certainly not happy that it ended as quickly as it did. But to the original question, would I have preferred to stay put in NXT for a little bit and develop? Sure. If NXT was as big as it is now, like even just staying put and being the voice of NXT, like I would have been fine with that. I would have been totally fine with that.
Well, can you speak, I guess, about the way that they want the announcers to sound on the WWE shows? Because you talked about how, there was a different feel to, Raw and SmackDown as opposed to NXT, which is sort of seen as this hybrid. Did you find that there was definitely a transition period from what you had learned in NXT and sort of the direction you were pointed in and guided in to then where they wanted you to be once you got up to call SmackDown or main event or Superstars, and that being sort of a different animal?
Yeah, I mean, so all of those shows are very different in the way that they were supposed to be called. Superstars was a Raw infomercial. All it was. You'd call the two matches, and you wouldn't really call the matches at all. You would intro to the match in Superstars, find a transition to talk about something else that was going on, and then you would talk about that other thing. And then you would pause if there was a high spot. You would pause for the high spot. You'd obviously call the finish. But generally speaking, you weren't calling the action in the ring. When you go to main event, you were calling a bit more of the action in the ring, but still getting over the other stories that you need to push, but it was a little more action oriented. And then SmackDown was kind of I guess a hybrid of that, because you're plugging stories, you're plugging all these different things, but there's a little bit more focus on what was going on in the ring. But at times you were just talking about other stuff, other stories that you need to get over. And then main event was a 2-person booth. Superstars is a 2-person booth. You go to SmackDown, it's a 3-person booth. So that becomes a whole different thing right there as well. So it definitely was challenging in some regards, especially you're in NXT and you're really focusing on what's happening in the ring for the most part. You're still telling stories, but the focus is the in-ring action. To go to Superstars and not focus on what's going on in the ring at all, and to be able to try to naturally find that transition to talk about whatever it is you're talking about. So, for instance, Jack Swagger might be in the ring. And it's Jack Swagger against, Heath Slater, cold match on Superstars. What does that match have to do with anything that's going on in the company? WrestleMania might be next week. So what does that match have to do with WrestleMania? So you need to find that common ground and transition that. So the match might start off and you're talking about XYZ, here's Swagger, here's, whoever he's wrestling, blah, 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 blah. Well, Jack Swagger might be in the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal. So, and Heath Slater might be not on WrestleMania. He might not have a match yet at WrestleMania. So what is their purpose for that match? Obviously, is to try to change people's minds and to try to get the attention of the brass to get an opportunity at WrestleMania. And if Swagger, for instance, is already in the Battle Royal, then that's your transition to talk right there. Well, we know Jack Swagger is going to be defeating the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal. Geez, remember what happened last year when Big Show, blah, 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 blah. Do you know what you see where I'm going with that?
Yeah.
So that's what that show was. And to be able to jump up from focusing on what's going on in the ring to transition to that, and to be able to find that natural sort of segue, and to be comfortable enough to, I don't want to say ignore what's going on in the ring, but to be able to find the spot to pull that in, it just takes a little bit of getting used to.
Well, is what's going on the main roster then sort of counterintuitive to developmental? Because the idea with NXT was to sort of feed upstream, but if you're being taught one way, I guess, down in NXT, and then move on up and being taught like everything you just learned is wrong, we need to do it differently. How does that work? Because I mean, not only with announcers, but we've seen it with interviewers. We've seen it with talent where what they did in NXT that worked is then sort of tweaked and changed to the main roster, where then it doesn't necessarily work as well as it once did. You know what I mean? So like how was there sort of problems, I guess, and not just with you, but maybe other people that also had come up from NXT around the same time with transitioning from what you had sort of been set as the foundation. You know, this is how we do things. This is what we want you to know. This is what we want you to learn. And then when you move up, it's just throw all that away. We're doing something entirely different.
I think Dusty did a good job when he was there, really drilling into everybody's heads to take whatever they give you and run with it. And you may not like what they give you, and you may not, you may see it as challenging. He would always talk about coming to WWF and Vince putting the polka dots on him. Mm-hmm. And he made that work. You know, the line in wrestling is you make chicken salad out of chicken shit. And he would talk about that all the time. He's like, look, whatever they give you, it could be completely different from what you're doing here, but make the best of it and take it and make it work for you. Now, was that easier said than done in the old days where there was a little more freedom? Maybe, I think, but I'm not sure. But I would just think that back in the day when you were kind of you were allowed a little bit more leeway in some ways as to what you were doing, that it might be easier to kind of go out and get over on your own. But we still see examples of that now, guys going out getting over on their own. Whether or not that actually pays off for them is a whole other story. But generally speaking, it was kind of drilled into us that, you know, we're going to give you guys the foundation here, but when you get the opportunity to go to the main roster, you have to be ready for anything. So again, is it counterintuitive? It probably is. I obviously haven't been there in I think it's like right now is about it. I think it's almost a year. Today might even be a year since I got the boot. So I haven't been there. I haven't been there in a while to really speak on what's going on now. But I know, like, the idea for the announcers, for instance, the announce desk is the same thing pretty much as what you have on the main roster. So to be able to go from calling shows at NXT to the first time that I did Superstars, it really wasn't that big of a transition as far as, like, once I got to the desk, because everything was pretty much the same. If you could ignore the fact that you're in this much larger arena and that Vince can hear you and Kevin Dunn's talking to you on the headset, if you can get past that stuff, it's pretty much the same. And I know for the talent as well, inside the Performance Center and at Full Sail, the ramp was pretty much the same. Gorilla was set up more or less the same. And again, the idea of that is when you go up to the main roster, it's not foreign to you. So when you walk down the ramp is the same thing. Mm. So there was some of that, but again, with that company, like if you go to Raw or you go to SmackDown, you have to be ready for whatever they give you, and you have to try to make it work. And it's probably easier said than done, but that's kind of the name of the game.
Did you find that there were some people who they just missed the boat on from coming up from NXT? I mean, who did you think was, I guess, the most either underappreciated or underutilized that should have been sort of easy for them, like a gift handed to them from NXT that somehow they got their hands on and just royally screwed it up?
You could probably look at a handful of guys. You could argue about the Ascension all day. That was a team that was obviously presented as this dominant force in NXT, and then you debut them and you spend whatever 3 weeks or a month or whatever it is doing these vignettes that the Ascension's coming, and then you put them out there and you immediately shit on them. I don't know what the point of that is. I don't know why. Why would you spend all this time building these guys up just to send them out there and make fun of them? I don't understand that, but again, I'm sure that there's somebody who's a smarter mind in the business than me that could say, well, they got up there and it was obvious that they weren't going to get over, so we decided to pull the plug right away. I don't know, but I never understood that. Tyler Breeze, I thought they could have done more with. I guess he's doing something with Fandango now or something. What I saw online, but he's a kid that, he's amazing. We saw some of the matches that he was able to pull. He was able to pull out in NXT. It's some amazing matches. But again, does an amazing match translate to the main roster? And a lot of times it doesn't. It's more about the character stuff up there. So why didn't his character work, or why isn't his character over more than it is? I don't know. I think Sami Zayn is a guy that could do a lot more with. Now, granted, for the last year, I'm not really 100% sure on who's doing what. Just based on kind of what I see on Twitter and the dirt sheets or whatever. But and another guy, Apollo Crews, and I guess he's doing something with Titus now. Is that right?
That is correct.
Titus's manager. Is that what I saw on Twitter?
Yes, something along those lines.
Well, okay. Here's a guy who is in incredible shape, who can do all this crazy stuff in the ring. He's like this hybrid between strength and agility and all that stuff. And he's super, super likable. So how hard is that? I don't know. I don't write the show. I know things aren't always as easy as they look from the other side. But here you have a super marketable guy. Super marketable. What have they done with him? I don't know. So that's a handful of guys right there that I look at and I say, geez, like, why didn't this work better? I don't know. How's Bayley doing on the road? Is she over right now, or is she?
Right now she's carrying the Raw Women's Championship. But there would be
okay. So there
but at the same time, you could also look at her and say, this isn't working as well as it was in NXT. There are different character things that they've done where you would say that's not necessarily consistent with who Bayley is or how Bayley is presented. And sometimes you could look at those things and say, maybe that works in the short term, but long term, is it going to help that person, or does it? Or there are going to be drawbacks to it, So what I found with people being called up from NXT is sometimes the tweaks have been unnecessary, and the tweaks don't help. Like sometimes they got there a certain way. Why not see where they go with it for the time being before you start changing? Like why break something? Why break something that doesn't need breaking? That's perfectly fixed.
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. But the other thing with that too is that a lot of times the writers, there are different writers, there are sometimes different producers. Everybody's aware with what's going on at NXT or whatever. But and at the end of the day, there are really two people up there that things end with, and obviously the end of the line is Vince, but Kevin Dunn has a lot to say with things as well. And there are other writers as well who may not be necessarily in tune 100% with what's going on down in NXT. Other times it's just that doesn't really matter because it's a different product in their eyes. So sometimes it's too many hands in the pot, I suppose. Things will get changed around. NXT, there are fewer people involved with writing the show. So I think that has something to do with it as well.
Let me ask you about working with JBL, because obviously that has been a hot button issue the last few weeks, and everything that's sort of surfaced with Justin Roberts, with Mauro Ranallo. What did you take away from your experience working with him? Did you find that he was a bully backstage with certain talent and certain people? Did you find that to be an enjoyable experience at all?
JBL has if he wants to be a good heel color commentator, he can be. He's a legend in the business, and it's really tough to, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to sound like I'm jumping on the Barry JBL bandwagon. Some people may think that I have already. I don't necessarily have any issues with JBL. He was always okay to me in the back. I really didn't enjoy working with him. Part of that is because his heel persona is, I mean, he's intimidating, and for somebody who's coming up, who's new to the main roster, you're still trying to get your footing to go out there and, I don't know, if you're in NXT and you have these guys that you're working with and you feel like you're a team and everybody's working together. At times I felt JBL was there just to jump on any little mistake that I made and kind of give it to you. But I mean, that's kind of his role, I guess. So it was challenging to work with him. It was difficult to work with him in some ways. And a lot of it's just a test. That's all it is. It's a test. They want to see whether or not you can take it. Again, I don't have anything against JBL necessarily. He was friendly enough to me in the back, or at least cordial enough, and whatever. Like, did I see him lay into people or give it to people sometimes? Yeah, I did. Things that in some ways I don't necessarily, I guess I don't think was called for at times. But some of the stuff is between people who had been there for a long time, much longer than me. So I don't really know what the history is behind some of that stuff, and whether or not it's all just a rib or whatever. So that's kind of, it's kind of muddy for me, because again, any broadcast partner that I've ever worked with, I always felt like we were a team and that we were working together. I didn't always get that sense from JBL. Now, whether or not that was him or whether or not that was coming from the voice in the headset, whether that was Cole or Vince or the guy in the truck or whatever, I don't know. Again, I'm thankful that I got the opportunity to do it. I'm thankful that I got to work with JBL. But he can be difficult to work with for sure.
Well, did you find that there was sort of a difference in culture generationally within the company? Between people who have been around a long time, who see things as sort of this old school type of way of doing things, and sort of a newer generation moving up, trying to sort of morph the company, but who have seen maybe who are more aware of different issues that would be seen as unprofessional or not okay by the standards of running a global enterprise, so to speak.
Maybe a little bit. There's still some of that, obviously some of the old guard that's there, and it's like any other sport or business. There's a certain culture that's there, and some things nobody's going to tell you until you get there and figure it out on your own. I'll like it to. I'll talk about pro hockey for example. If you ever walk into a pro hockey locker room and there's the rug in the middle of the room with the team logo on it, if you walk across that team logo, you're going to get it. You're going to get dumped on. But how would you know that unless somebody told you? But nobody's going to tell you that. You just kind of need to. And that's one of those things that kind of separates the people from, okay, he's in or he's not in. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So there's certain things in the back that I guess fall into that, and certain protocols or ways to do things or whatever. I think it's changing a little bit, but there's still some of that. It's not all bad that all that stuff is there. That's what makes it unique. But there is some of the stuff that, I don't know, people getting picked on for petty things or whatever. Just people not knowing when to stop giving somebody a hard time, I guess. But again, that's everywhere. Is that unique to that company? I don't think it is. I just think it maybe gets more attention because of what it is. You know what I mean?
No, I get exactly what you mean. Let me ask you about being taken off of SmackDown. At that point in time, Mauro Ranallo was coming up, or had signed and was then being given that spot. Were you given any sort of indication that change was coming at that point in time, or did you think everything was smooth sailing since you'd only been given that job just a few short months ago?
I guess I could kind of sense something was changing. Look, I knew the show was moving to USA in January, and my gut was that when the move happened, that they were going to put Cole back on it, just for the initial transition, and then decide from there whether or not it would be me or Tom or whoever else, right? I found out, I was told that Mauro was coming in the beginning of December, I think. Maybe the first week or second week of December. So they gave me a heads up by a couple of weeks. And that was definitely appreciated. I was told specifically not to look at it as a demotion, that I was part of the future, and that just to keep doing what I was doing is what I was told. Just keep doing what you're doing. I said, okay. I understood it. Obviously, I wasn't thrilled about being pulled off the second biggest show in the company, but I understood why, and I got it. And Mauro's a bigger name than me. He's done Showtime boxing and big fights, right? So he's a bigger name. I got it. Totally understood it. Got why. And my attitude was there's plenty of work for everybody. Superstars, main event, NXT, whatever else, right? So, I mean, again, I wasn't thrilled about it, but I understood it, and I was okay with it, I guess. I guess I was probably more surprised a month later when everything that I just told you was basically flipped on me, and all of a sudden I was the guy who wasn't doing what they asked. But, oh, you need to do this, or you need to do that, or you're not working hard enough, or whatever. And I was like, what? This is completely different from what you told me last month. So, whatever, right? So Mauro came in, and again, I was happy enough doing main event, doing superstars. I was probably more pissed that I wasn't on NXT at that point, because originally Tom and I were supposed to switch. We were supposed to split NXT shows, and that's another thing that I was told, that he and I would be splitting NXT, and then all of a sudden January comes around and I'm not doing NXT anymore. I was probably more pissed about that than anything else.
Was that then sort of the writing on the wall for you that your time in the company was running short?
I definitely felt like I was swimming upstream at that point.
Well, your wife was also none too happy at that time about your departure.
You know what? That whole thing. I'll address that real quick. That tweet was sent to her by somebody, and to be honest with you, that was more in reference to somebody else at the Performance Center than it was to me, or than it was with me, as far as, if you want to say giving people a hard time or making it difficult for somebody to get ahead. There was somebody else who was at the Performance Center who was basically handcuffed from doing anything that the announcers were supposed to do at the Performance Center, because, if you're familiar, I don't, you know what, the hell with it. Tom made it difficult for a friend of mine who was there. Quite honestly, my friend Alex, who was hired, who was there. Now, again, at that point, I wasn't at the Performance Center on a day-to-day basis, but I know Alex, and I know he works hard, and I know that he's enthusiastic and into the product or whatever. But there were certain things that, for instance, when I got to the Performance Center, that I was allowed to do and that I was told to do, because that was part of the learning process. And now this guy is there, and my friend is there, and he's supposed to be going through that whole process, except he's being told, no, you can't do this, 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 and this. It's like, well, then what is he supposed to do? So, again, that had more to do with that, I think, than it did with me. But again, politics, that's part of it. Do I blame Tom and some of the other people involved, I mean, they wanted their guy. I wanted my guy. He won. So there you go.
Let me ask you about WrestleCircus and Fest Wrestling. Yeah. Because we've actually talked at length on this podcast about WrestleCircus and sort of this very strange animal that has become sort of springing out of nowhere. How did you get involved with those promotions, and is there a longer term future for you with either or both?
Well, I hope so. So I'll start with Fest Wrestling. Fest Wrestling is run out of Gainesville. Every year there's a big 3-day event called Fest. I think it's festfl.com. And essentially it's a 3-day indie rock, punk rock, hardcore festival. It's always the weekend that the Gators play in Jacksonville. So basically Gainesville becomes punk rock central. And you get people from all over the world that come in for this, bands that come in from all over the world that come in for this thing. And it's just, it's a really, really, really good time. Tony Weinbender's the guy who runs Fest. He's been doing it for, I think, 16 years now, whatever. He's a huge wrestling fan. And I actually met him a couple of times when we would do shows in Stark, Florida, which is not too far from Gainesville. It's out in the middle of nowhere. But anyway, Tony would come up, and I met him a couple of times. My affiliation with them really came. So I get released from WWE last April. And at that point, for a while, I wanted zero to do with wrestling. I didn't watch it. I didn't want to be around it. I was just pissed. Not pissed, but I was just sick of it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And just needed to step back and take a break. A friend of mine actually plays in a band who was playing Fest. And he said, hey, you know what? I'm going to be in Gainesville in October. My band's playing a reunion show at Fest. You should come up and hang out. So I was like, all right, cool. So he put me in touch with Tony. Tony knew me, knew who I was, and he mentioned to me, hey, we're doing this Fest Wrestling show. Would you have any interest in doing commentary? So I was like, I was like, I'll tell you what. Hook up my wife with a pass for the weekend, and I'll come up and I'll do it. I said, okay, fine. So that was kind of my litmus test to see if I still enjoyed doing it. Because if I enjoyed it, then I could continue. If I didn't, at least I did a show and I got to go see a bunch of bands that I've been waiting to see forever. Like Knapsack played, Sam I Am played. I've been waiting for 20 years to see Sam I Am. I finally saw them. So anyway, that was that. And it turns out that I had a blast. I had so much fun that I said, I want to keep doing this. And that's kind of where we are now. And that, Fest is just sort of, there's a few of these promotions like this that I guess are kind of popping up, these sort of punk rock indie promotions where people are, you stand around the ring. There's not necessarily seats. It's just more of a fun atmosphere, I suppose. So I started doing that. WrestleCircus came about so I've been trying to see what other different bookings I might be able to get. And I'll just say that in some ways it's difficult for indie announcers, if you want to call us that. Like most indie promotions aren't spending money on their announcers, which I think is a mistake in some ways. I'm not saying this just to get myself more work. There's a handful of other guys who are good as well, who promoters can bring in. But a lot of times they don't want to spend money on the announcers. They just get Joe Blow to do it or whatever wrestler to do it for free. And you put it on iPPV and the mics sound bad. There's no audio processing. You have two guys that don't really know what they're doing announcing a match. I don't understand how that helps a viewer watching on iPPV if you're just popping each other and making inside jokes the whole time and whatever. So, but again, promoters don't necessarily want to spend the money to bring in announcers. WrestleCircus came about from being at a show at Fest where I ran into Sami Callihan, who I knew from my time at NXT. He was Solomon Crow when I was there. And he didn't even realize that I was still in Orlando. And he's like, holy shit, I didn't know that you were still here. What are you doing Mania Week? I said, no, right now I'm not doing anything. And he mentioned a couple of shows, and it worked out that I was available to do the Midnight After Mania show, which is WrestleCircus against Pro Wrestling Revolver. I went and I did that, and then next thing I know, I'm talking to Al from WrestleCircus, and he's like, yeah, I think we'll bring you in for our shows. So that's kind of where that is. So Sunday I'll hop on the plane, get to Austin, do the show, and have a blast. So that's kind of what that is.
Very cool. What lessons, I guess, overall did you take away from your WWE experience? And are there any words of wisdom, I guess, that you could pass along to anyone who sees that as the destination of their wrestling dreams, as far as, what to be aware of, what to prepare yourself for, and what to be ready to encounter if you want to get into the WWE?
Well, number one, have a thick skin. Number two, be ready for anything. And I guess number three, whatever they give you, try to make it work. Don't believe that you can't make it there. If somebody wants to get there, I know the odds are astronomical of getting there, but I felt like I won the lottery getting there. The stars aligned in very strange ways, and I got there. I never thought that I would have the opportunity to. So if I can get there, if you're good at what you do, then you never know when or if an opportunity might come up. I'd say it's easier for wrestlers to get there than it is for announcers, because there's more opportunities as a wrestler. But if that's your goal and if that's your dream, chase it. On the same hand, don't ignore the journey. Enjoy the journey, because, and I know it's cliche, but the journey a lot of times is a lot more fun than the destination. It's not all peaches and roses and fun and whatever. I mean, when you get there, it's a business, it's a machine, it's work. There are times that it can suck. By and large, overall, if that's your goal, go for it. But just know going into it that, again, it's not a playground. There's political stuff you got to look out for, people who are going to try to cut you off at the knees. I was told right when I started, don't trust anybody. Don't trust anyone. And I'm more of a trusting soul. There were probably a few people that I trusted that I shouldn't have. You have to look out for yourself, and you have to take care of yourself in a lot of different ways. So go in with your eyes wide open. Expect to work hard. Sometimes you're going to work hard and you're not going to get the results that you think you deserve. Other times stuff's just going to pop up and you have to be ready for it. So, but like for example, if you're doing indie wrestling right now, if somebody's an announcer and they want to get there, but you're doing indie wrestling, like the fact that you're doing an indie show doesn't diminish what you're doing. It doesn't make it less than. WWE isn't the only destination. It's not the only place. Make what you're doing the best that it can be. That's my philosophy.
All right, Rich, I got one more question for you, because I know that you're a hockey guy. So I need to know, at the end of this season and after all of these overtimes, who is your prediction to raise the Stanley Cup?
Oh, good God. You're really going to hit me with this, right?
Yes, I am.
I actually think now, after seeing what I've seen, Nashville could really surprise a lot of people. The fact that they swept Chicago was obviously a huge surprise, right? But I mean, Pekka Rinne has been playing incredible. Peter Laviolette, he's actually done a great job with that team the last couple of years. I remember even last year, 2 years ago, they had a very good team. They just didn't have kind of it. They were missing that thing. I almost liken it to the Capitals, where the Capitals are always this amazing team, but they're lacking that extra something. Like, I still don't think the Capitals are going to do it this year. I really don't. But I will say this. Here's a little research that I did. So they've won the President's Trophy the last 2 years, the Washington Capitals. Any team that has won the President's Trophy in back-to-back years, it's only happened 5 times. That team has gone on to win the Stanley Cup in the second year 4 times. Vancouver's the only team that hasn't won the Cup after winning the President's Trophy back-to-back years. So history is on the side of the Washington Capitals. However, I still don't think they're going to do it. I think Nashville is going to surprise a lot of people. Do they ultimately lift the Cup? That's a good question. St. Louis is going to be a huge test for them. But I have to believe that the winner is going to come out of the West. So if it's not Nashville, maybe Anaheim. But I believe the West is gonna take it this year.
Went real deep on that stat. Real deep dive on that statistic. All right, Rich. I appreciate it. I'll talk wrestling and hockey with you anytime.
Hey, anytime, man. Give me a call. I'd love to do it, man. Whatever you want. So, hey, I got to plug WrestleCircus again this Sunday. WrestleCircus.com. It's on iPPV. There's going to be some really awesome matches. Moose is going to be there. Davey Boy Smith Jr. is going to be there. Just a whole litany of people. Brian Cage is the ringmaster champion. He defends the title. Lots of good stuff. WrestleCircus.com this Sunday on iPPV.
Rich Bocchini, thank you very much, dude.
Thanks, Billy.
All right, so with all this talk about WrestleCircus from Rich Bocchini, well, you know who can't be too far behind. It has to be our resident wrestling expert, the Professor Tom Nix, who is here on the This Is Infamous hotline. Tom, I knew you were lurking somewhere once the words WrestleCircus came up, and here you are.
WrestleCircus. WrestleCircus.
It's like if we say it 3 times, you're like Beetlejuice.
Well, that's why I didn't say it 3 times. I don't need a whole bunch of beefy men appearing behind me and throwing me through walls. That's not going to happen.
All right. So, I mean, look, Rich already talked about WrestleCircus and hyped it up, and look, and gave it significant plug. But I know that is not enough for you. You want to make sure as many people are exposed to WrestleCircus as humanly possible. So,
yes.
So go ahead, spin the hype machine, get it going. Why is it that people should be tuning into WrestleCircus this weekend?
I'm revving that hype machine up right now. So WrestleCircus is a promotion near and dear to my heart. I have been front row to every single event they've ever hosted back from October of last year up until the April show that's about to happen this weekend. And somehow they always find a way to put together a better card than the card before that, which is amazing in this kind of age of indie wrestling. So I know you've already gotten hyped up from Rich about like what it is and how cool it is, but I wanted to take you all through the card that is about to happen this Sunday, April 30th. If you are in the Texas area, the tickets are still available. You can still get a GA seat. I think they're like $15. It's not that expensive. So you can actually be there in person with me. I'll give you a hug. That's a promise. And if you're not anywhere in Texas, you can also buy their pay-per-view for $9.99 through WrestleCircus.com. They have their own IPPV channel. So let's go through some of this stuff. So one of the first things I need to talk about is they are putting on, and they're very good at this, they are putting on one of their famed intergender matches this time through. So previously they've done stuff like, if you can imagine it, Tessa Blanchard versus Donovan Dijak. That was a crazy one, but it was super competitive and great, and they treat the women really, really well at WrestleCircus. So they have a tag team intergender match between ACH and his tag team partner Christy Janes, who's a local Texas wrestler, versus Colt Cabana and Delilah Doom. I talked about Delilah Doom last week. She's incredible. You all know Colt Cabana is incredible. That is a team I never thought would be put together. And it's going to be a super fun, really good match. We also have Ricky Starks and Aaron Solo versus Monkey Flip, which is the team of Space Monkey, whose gimmick is that he's a literal monkey from space. He has a tail, and he only speaks in monkey. And Flip Gordon versus the Boys. And by the Boys, I do mean Dalton Castle's Boys. They are a regular at WrestleCircus, and they are really good at wrestling. They never get a chance to show it on Ring of Honor, but they're really, really good. We're kind of getting the comedy matches out of the way. The next one I'm super excited about, which is Jervis Cottonbelly, who might be one of my favorite wrestlers of all time, versus Kikotaro, who is a Japanese comedy wrestler. And this match is going to make Billy Donnelly really angry. because there
Why,
will not be,
Tom? Why is it
will
going
not
to make
be
you really
any psychology in this match. There will not be anyone pretending even the slight bit to be hurt or that wrestling is a physical, grueling process. It's going to be two weirdos being weird for 10 minutes. And I'm going to love the hell out of it. And Billy's just going to sit in Florida grinding his teeth the entire 10 minutes.
All right. I'm looking forward to that one.
Also, speaking of intergender, they have Ethan Page, who is making a huge name for himself in Evolve right now. If you guys caught any of the Evolve shows, they are rapidly making all ego Ethan Page the villain of the company. And when you've got Zack Sabre Jr. and ACH and Keith Lee and sometimes Donovan Dijak and sometimes Michael Elgin, and you've got these huge names in Evolve, and your main heel is basically a guy who broke into the scene in Cleveland and is kind of chubby and is kind of doofy. But he has a mean streak like no other, and it's amazing. They are putting him up against one half of the world's cutest tag team, Candice LeRae. And I'm going to be so angry every time Candice gets hurt in this match, because she will, because Ethan Page is an asshole and Candice LeRae is a perfect angel from heaven. And it's going to be amazing and horrible for me at the same time. They have a four-way big man challenge, which is Ray Rowe versus the British Bulldog Davey Boy Smith versus Godzilla Jax Dane, another Texas guy, versus formerly from Ring of Honor, now TNA star Moose. That could be a lot of fun. It's going to be a lot of big dudes throwing a lot of other big dudes around, but I'm into that. Rachel Ellering, the current women's champion, is going up against Taya Valkyrie, who you probably know from Lucha Underground. That's going to be amazing. And that's followed by Sammy Guevara, one of the standouts of WrestleCircus, probably the largest, the biggest, most over quote-unquote homegrown talent out of WrestleCircus. Superb high flyer, great character work. In the past, 6-8 months since they've been doing these, he has pretty much been on every single show and has gone from, a high flyer that was always puts on good matches to one of the marquee names. And I think WrestleCircus is the only reason he's showing up in places like Evolve, and probably the only reason he got a WWE tryout is because of how quickly the WrestleCircus fans have latched onto him. He is going up against Matt Sydal, which is going to be super high flying, super fun. And then the championship match, our champion is Brian Cage, the Machine. He's going up against John Morrison, a.k.a. Johnny Nitro, a.k.a. Johnny Mundo from Lucha Underground. He's got a lot of AKAs. He's been around a lot. That will be a match I think everyone's seen before because it's happened on Lucha Underground several times. But it's nice to know that a little local Texas promotion can pull that kind of talent in. But the match I am most excited about, the match that is going to burn the building to the ground, is Ohio is for Killers, which is Sami Callihan and the Christ brothers, Dave and Jake, going up against Shane Strickland, Leo Rush, and Desmond Xavier. I don't even know what to expect from that match besides perfection. And the match of the week, your homework, is going to be a semi look into that match. So if you get to watch the homework later, you will probably get a little more excited about what is going to happen at this six-man tag match. It's from front to bottom, it's super stacked. What I like about WrestleCircus is that they do an awesome job of showcasing women, having intergender matches, having comedy matches, having different styles. They're even doing their very first ever hardcore match between Jordan Lennox, who's a high flyer, versus George Gatton, a.k.a. the Trash Man. There's a whole story behind the Trash Man, which we'll get into on probably next week's episode when we break down what actually happened. But they're actually going to have a hardcore match, several high flyers match, big man match, intergender matches, a great women's contest, a kind of a mixed styles between Brian Cage and John Morrison, and then that crazy six-man tag match. That's why I like WrestleCircus so much, is even though the shows do run a little long, they're close to 4 hours, they have such a varied lineup that never feels like you're just watching the same stuff over and over again, or traditional wrestling over and over again. You know, for every match that Billy is going to grind his teeth and yank his hair out, there's going to be 2 more that he's going to absolutely love, because they have people that focus very, very, very highly on making wrestling seem as real as possible. It's going to be a really good show. I hope if you're in Texas, you come and watch it. Otherwise, like I said, WrestleCircus.com, you can sign up for their IPPV. It's $10, and that's cheaper than any individual seat in the whole house. So you will be able to see an entire show for not a lot of money at all. And like I said, top to bottom, this might be one of, if not the best card they've ever put together. So WrestleCircus, guys, do not sleep on it. Some of the best matches of the year are happening right under your nose in Austin, Texas.
I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. You had me at Space Monkey. I'm not going to lie. $10 to satisfy my curiosity over Space Monkey, I think that's a good price.
You know how people throw streamers into the ring for like Zack Sabre and like the Japanese wrestlers? We throw bananas in the ring. For like real bananas for Space Monkey. So be on the lookout for that, because that's going to happen.
Yeah, and if this is your first WrestleCircus show, also be on the lookout for flying bananas. Just as a heads up, I wouldn't want to be blindsided by a banana without a little bit of warning. So I'm just saying, we're putting it out there. If you're going to WrestleCircus, this is your first time ever, duck.
Yeah, Space Monkey and Jervis Cottonbelly had a match a couple months ago, and there was a legit slipping on a banana peel spot in that match, and it was amazing.
I may check in on this one. Okay, I think $10 is a good deal. I'm not gonna lie, $10 to sit at home and watch it is a good deal. Now, it's gonna be sort of play by ear, because who knows how frustratingly exhausted I may be after Payback. Which is also on Sunday night.
Good point.
So then to invest like another 4 hours, I may just be like mentally checked out.
Guys, I gotta tell you, this happens on the same day. It's April 30th. WrestleCircus happens at the same time. Actually, a little earlier. I think it starts at 6 p.m. 6 p.m. Central. So that'd be 7 for Billy and 7 on the East Coast, and then 4 for our West Coast listeners. This show is going to be better than Payback. Just be honest. Plus, you will be able to watch this live. Then after it's done, and after you've had an awesome night of great independent wrestling, you can then fast forward through Payback to the 2 matches you want to see and call it a day.
Are there really 2?
I'm interested in the House of Horrors match, just because I don't really know what it's going to look like.
I don't think they do either.
And it could be a very bad decision on my part, but like really, Payback. Nothing's happening at Payback. Watch WrestleCircus. Watch it. Watch it. It's a monkey. It's a monkey.
It is a space monkey.
It's a monkey fighting 2 guys dressed as peacocks. What else do you want out of professional wrestling, people? This is the height of the art.
I mean, if anybody knows me knows how much I love Dalton Castle. So anything that's around Dalton Castle, I'm all in on as well. Dalton Castle's going to be a huge star soon enough, and
yes, he will.
And if you haven't seen Dalton Castle, for those of you who are just sort of on the outskirts of Ring of Honor, when you watch Dalton Castle you just cannot look away. And so probably for a bunch of reasons, but I'm just saying you take Dalton Castle's slave boys and you stick them off on their own. I'm fine with that. I'm in Dalton Castle's boys and the Space Monkey. You got my $10. Okay, you and Rich have given me the hard sell. I'm in for WrestleCircus.
We do need to clarify something. The boys are voluntarily employed by Dalton Castle. They are not his slave boys.
Fair enough, if we want to be technical about it. All right, so there's your hype for WrestleCircus. So make sure you check it out. If you don't get to check it out on Sunday night, you still make the time to go check it out. And once again, that's the point of sort of Tom being here, is to expose us to wrestling we otherwise may not be exposed to, and this is the way for us to broaden our horizons. So with that said, I broadened some horizons this week by doing the homework. Once again, we went back to Evolve 81. Homework for this week, Fred Yehi and Matt Riddle was the match that I was assigned to watch, as well as all of you out there. You were assigned to watch it as well, if you could make the time for it. Tom thought that this would be a little bit more to my liking after I was kind of on the week before.
He says kind of what he means is kind of wrong. No, so that's all right.
I mean, look, I was okay on the week before his homework. So look, I did take the time prior to firing up the mic for talking to you here. I did watch Fred Yehi and Matt Riddle in its entirety, and I also put in some extra credit, which we'll get into after we discuss this match. But I did watch Yehi and Riddle, and I did like this match much more than Donovan Dijak and Keith Lee from the previous week. Look, there are some things that you could easily nitpick on this match.
Of course.
But this was, I think, a little bit more my speed when it comes to what I like to get out of wrestling. You had sort of these two guys going at it in the name of competition, and there was a psychology involved in it. The story going in was sort of Matt Riddle had wrestled, I guess, the night prior as part of Evolve 80, and had suffered some damage to his head and neck area. And as a result, that was the weakness of the match. Fred Yehi working on his submission style to punish those areas of Matt Riddle, and as a result, weaken his opponent. And Matt Riddle then having to sort of overcome that punishment in order to try and score a victory. Once again, as we talked about last week, very simple story. It doesn't have to be a long-form, crazy story told out to make these matches mean something. Something very simple like that can tell the story of a particular match. And as a result, I thought this match was able to sort of stand out on its own, hold up on its own as just a match you could put on at any point in time and watch two guys go and do a really good job of getting you into the match. There are a couple of things that I can nitpick. I could say, why at some point in the middle of the match is Fred Yehi all of a sudden going to work on Matt Riddle's legs? If you're going to pick a body part, isolate one body part and stick with it. You don't need to do the whole body. Just go to one body part. Just work on it. If it's his head and neck, and that's what we're focusing on, stick to the head and neck.
I agree.
There's no need to all of a sudden be like, now I'm going to work on his knee. Because why? There's no reason to. And then on top of that, I think one of the other things that stood out to me was, and this is a criticism of anybody out there who may be involved in wrestling. Not like I'm the expert, but this is just something that I pulled from this is, you got to protect your moves too. You got to protect the other guy's moves, because when Matt Riddle comes out with a leaping tombstone pile driver, and Fred Yehi kicks out at one, that's not a good look for that move. And especially if he then follows it up with another leaping tombstone pile driver, and Fred Yehi kicks out now at two. But like a tombstone pile driver is one that you stash in your bag for major moments. They're not just a tombstone pile driver is not a toss aside move. You know what I'm saying? That's the one that has some gravitas to it, and you can't just it's a tombstone pile driver, just sort of shrug it off. So that was something that sort of stood out to me. And one other thing that I could pick on is when the guy's gonna have the comeback. I like my comeback to happen by mistake. If by
clarify that.
Yeah, I like the comeback to happen by mistake. So if a guy is getting his ass kicked, okay, just getting beat on and suffering punishment and getting pounded on, when he is then put into a German suplex, he shouldn't no-sell the German suplex and immediately go into the comeback. I would prefer, a guy getting a little too confident, a little too cocky, and then making a mistake to turn the tides, as opposed to the John Cena Superman comeback.
Unfortunately, I got to give you a couple things about Matt Riddle. I don't think it's actually officially part of his gimmick, but Matt Riddle is impervious to German suplexes.
Okay, then.
That happens in every match. Like someone will suplex him and he'll just get right up. Like it's like it's like people just stop doing that to him because they don't hurt him.
Fair enough.
Now, granted, is that a fair criticism? Yes. Would it take someone out of the match who wouldn't know that little tidbit about Matt Riddle, even though it's kind of a ridiculous tidbit to begin with? Yeah, absolutely. Because the guy just literally, like you said, like it is in every form a no-sell. He gets suplexed and he just rolls out of it and comes right back at you like he didn't even get hurt at all. But like he fought last month at WrestleCircus again. He fought Brian Cage for the title. And Brian Cage, as everyone knows, is like 350 pounds and will throw you over his head. And every single time Matt Riddle got German suplexed, he rolled out of it and ran right back at Brian Cage. It's just you cannot hurt him with a German suplex. You just can't.
See, I would be okay with that if that was consistent through the match, because I believe as part of the head and shoulder and neck story, there were suplexes and Germans being delivered to Matt Riddle that were affecting him because of the psychology of the match. So if that's the way we want to go, and like because his head and his neck are injured from the previous night, and now German suplexes have more of an effect on him, then yeah, I'm all for it. But up until then, he was taking every German suplex and everyone had impact except for one. And that turned the tide of the match. And I was like, nah, for a second, No, wait a second. Now, look, those are some nitpicks on the match, and those are things that, in retrospect, you can look at and say, you know, if these two guys did these things a little bit differently, maybe their match could have been better. Not to say that it was a bad match. I enjoyed the match, and I thought it was really good. There's a great spot with Fred Yehi just delivering a barrage of kicks to Matt Riddle's chest that I thought was a great spot, because how does one recover from that? That's something that is meaningful, and as a result, Matt Riddle sold it incredibly well as something that was hurting him. So, so in that respect, I thought this match was told really well. It built, you know, as opposed to the Keith Lee Donovan Dijak movie, which I thought was just power move after power move. I thought this move built to the point where the moves towards the end, or spots towards the end, did have much more impact and did have much more meaning, with the exception of the Tombstone Piledriver shrug off. But other than that, as being sort of the exception to the rule, I thought it was a pretty solid match. I thought these two guys told a really good story for the match itself, and I dug it. So look, and with that said, I did put in some extra credit. I got super into that match that I said, what comes on Evolve 81 next? And I stayed through and I watched the main event between Darby Allin and Ethan Page. So I got, so they got, so they got to lean in. They got to carry through. The momentum. I was into it enough that the momentum carried me through to watch the main event. Now, I didn't particularly dig the main event, but it got me through there. So credit to Fred Yehi and Matt Riddle for at least getting me through to the main event. Then not so much credit to Darby Allin and Ethan Page for just having me sort of just giving me a glazed over look as I watched their display of meaningless brutality.
Basically that match exists for you to kind of marvel at how stupid Darby Allin is. That's kind of the whole match. So, he doesn't take care of himself at all.
Yeah, you know what? Watching that match, and it's very strange, because once upon a time I would have watched that match and gotten super excited about it.
Sure.
But we grow, and we evolve, and we age. And now when I watch that match, I go, why are they doing this? And look, and I'm sure that somewhere else there's like a 16 or 18-year-old kid who thinks that match is amazing. But I feel like the time for those matches has come and gone in my life. And as a result, unless there's like a real serious meaning for it to happen, I'm not quite there.
Yeah, and that's it. Like, I mean, so the previous event saw before that, I think 2 events before, saw Darby Allin get just absolutely beaten up by Ethan Page and the Gatekeepers and like shoved in a body bag and like dragged out of the arena and kind of like left for dead. So like it makes sense that his comeback would be kind of his style of match and he would want to go all out and quote unquote get revenge against this guy. But like you said, it just is, a lot of it was just look at how brutal this is. It wasn't really trying to tell a story per se. It was just like, here's some crazy spots from a crazy person. And while that obviously has its place in wrestling, it does. It's just not either of ours, it's just not either of the things that you and I care to see all that much.
No, not quite.
Because we actually we've gotten to the point and the age where we want wrestlers to retire and have good lives and not have massive health problems when they're 40. And that's where Darby Allin's heading, is massive health problems when he's 40.
He reminds me, just watching it, he reminds me sort of the Sandman, but in the body of Spike Dudley.
Yes.
Like that, and look, and the Sandman had his time and his place, and Spike Dudley had his time and his place. But let's also remember, those are 2 guys who are making up for weaknesses. They weren't exactly the most athletic. They weren't exactly the most skilled in the ring, and as a result, their gift was to just take punishment. And yep. I can't find myself all that into that anymore. Look, there are times it could work. I'm not saying that it's impossible. There are times it could work, but I got to be really invested in watching these guys lay it all out for one time only. For that to connect with me. So I put in some extra credit. It didn't quite do it for me. But Fred Yehi and Matt Riddle, I'm going to give you a solid recommendation on that one, Tom, because that one I did dig quite a bit.
Yeah, it was a good match. And also, just to fill in a little bit of gaps on that match, like you said, the story from the match was Matt Riddle got pile driven through a table the night before and was really hurting. But the reason that match happened is Matt Riddle was de facto the leader of a faction called Catch Point, which you may have heard of, or they might have referenced it in the actual thing itself. Because he started becoming such a big star, he stopped coming out with them. He stopped kind of associating with them so much, even though he was technically part of it. And Fred Yehi, who's also in Catch Point and is all about the spirit of competition no matter what, kind of got fed up with their leader being kind of a celebrity doofus and said, listen, we got to fight about this. You aren't representing us and we have to settle this. So they settled it in the way Catch Point does, which is fighting in the ring. And I'm super glad it ended the way it did. I thought it was an excellent build for that match. And then that storyline with Fred Yehi has continued all the way to Evolve 83 that happened just a little while ago. They're continuing his dissatisfaction with his teammates. So I'm glad they're sticking with that storyline. And this was a good match on that storyline road.
Well, and one of the other things I really dug, especially at least as far as the way that the match was booked, and this is something that as we try to shine a light on things non-WWE on the show, is that if that match were to take place in a WWE ring, for example, Matt Riddle would easily be the winner of that match. Okay, correct. Easily, because he's a single superstar, and Fred Yehi is one half of the tag team champions, and as a result, there's sort of a hierarchy set as far as the single stars are higher than the tag team stars. In this case, Fred Yehi being one half of the Evolve Tag Team Champions gets the win, and as a result, that protects the value of the tag team belts too, by having him win it. He's not just, he's just another tag team guy. No, this means this guy is for real. This tag team is for real, and it sort of helps elevate the other titles on the card, not just the main championship. So I thought that was another nice little nod, at least in the booking for this match, because Matt Riddle, who is already established and is a single superstar in Evolve, and gives a little bit of rub to Fred Yehi, who was already there as a tag team champion, but it allows the tag team championship to be meaningful by having one half of the champions score a singles victory over Matt Riddle.
And a clean victory, no cheating, no outside interference, just he beat him. That's a great story.
I would agree.
And that also, I won't recommend that you watch all of this match because the final sequences are really going to aggravate you a lot, Billy. But that ties into
goddamn no selling.
Yeah, no, for real. The next night's main event was to crown the WWN Championship. The first ever, who's the champion of the entire WWN network, not just Evolve. It's all their promotions. And that match had Tracy Williams, Fred Yehi, Matt Riddle. It was going to be Drew Galloway, but he got replaced because he went to NXT. And then a couple other guys from Florida. And because Fred Yehi beat Matt Riddle the night before, that instantly pushes him higher on, well, shit, maybe he could actually be WWN champion. He beat the favorite, that was a good entry level into that match. That match is really good, but once it gets down to the final two competitors, there is a crazy amount of no selling, crazy amount. So it kind of loses steam by the end because of how unbelievable the kickouts are. But up until that point, it's a phenomenal match. So if you that's not the homework, but it's a very good match. The six-way elimination match to crown the first ever WWN Championship is a great match with great storytelling. But once the eliminations happen and you're down to the final two, there's a lot of kickouts that just don't make any sense from a psychology standpoint. So I wish that didn't happen, but that is what it is.
All right, Tom, I got my notepad and my pencil out here. I'm ready to take my notes. What is the homework for this particular week?
All right, this should get you a little pumped up for the six-man tag match that you are about to watch at WrestleCircus, because I know you're all going to watch that and ditch Payback like you should. This is a match from the Progress show on WrestleMania weekend. Unfortunately, it is not streaming on FlowSlam. You have to actually be a member of Demand Progress, which I believe is only $7.50 a month. And trust me, that whole pay-per-view is worth $7.50. And with that $7.50, you get to watch every other Progress show they've ever done. So take advantage of your 1 month if you're going to subscribe just for this homework. That match is from the Progress Orlando show, and it is the South Pacific Power Trip versus the team of Sami Callihan and Shane Strickland, who will be competing against each other in this six-man tag match. I had never seen the South Pacific Power Trip before, ever, and they are one of the most legit tag teams in the world. They are incredible, and Shane Strickland and Sami Callihan should need no introduction. They work well together. They work amazing as opponents. It's just really, really, really great tag team wrestling. Yeah, there's some spots. There's still a lot of good psychology, but that was one of the highlights of the entire weekend for me, was watching that match, especially never having seen any Progress stars live before. Please go and find South Pacific Power Trip versus Shane Strickland and Sami Callihan for the I'm not even sure if it was for the tag team titles. I think it might have just been it just might have been a match. But definitely one of the highlights of that weekend, and you'll get to see two of the competitors of this six-man match that's just going to blow the roof off of Austin. It should get you really prime and pumped to watch how those guys fight against each other after watching them fight together.
Follow Tom Nix on Twitter at the Tom Nix, TheTomNix, the Tom Nix. And Tom will be back next week to talk at length with me about a space monkey.
Man, it's gonna happen. He has a tail.
I'm curious enough. It's only $10, and I'm curious enough. So, the Tom Nix, thank you, man, once again for enlightening us to all the wrestling that is out there in the wrestling landscape. And once again, WrestleCircus this Sunday, WrestleCircus.com, I believe, correct?
That's right.
That's right. So make sure $10 you get to see a space monkey fight through flying bananas. All right, Tom. Thanks very much, dude.
Yes, sir. Bye.
Woo! That was one hell of a show, like I told you it was going to be. So I hope I delivered on the promise and the hype, and I hope you enjoyed this particular episode of the IWC. Look, make sure you subscribe to Intelligent Wrestling Conversation wherever it is that you get your podcast from. We're there wherever it's most convenient for you. iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Blueberry, and now TuneIn as well. So make sure you subscribe to the podcast, you rate the podcast, and you leave us some feedback, comments for the podcast. That is always helpful to us. So just make sure you take those 3 steps, and you'll be able to have the podcast from here on out, every single episode of the IWC delivered right to wherever it is you listen to your podcast. I want to thank my guest, Rich Bocchini, for coming on and talking extensively about his time in NXT and the WWE. Also, my thanks to the professor, Tom Nix. Look, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Infamous Kid. That's Kidd at the end, Infamous Kid. And also at the IWC Show for all updates when we have another podcast dropping for your listening pleasure. This has been Intelligent Wrestling Conversation. I have been your host, Billy Donnelly. We'll be back here next week talking about WWE Payback and WrestleCircus. So hope you have a good weekend. I'm out for now. Peace. Intelligent Wrestling Conversation has been a podcast presentation of This Is Infamous.